guys, how's it going? Welcome to our third panel of DorkX, where we are going to be talking about grief and death and tabletop role playing. We'll get introductions on everybody, but first, please welcome Em from Blackwater D&D. Hi, Em. Thanks for coming.
Oh my gosh, thanks so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, so excited. And so Em is the creative director over at Blackwater D&D and player and storyteller and all around amazing person. But you're also a therapist.
I am. Yeah, I'm a registered clinical counselor here in Vancouver, but licensed in all of BC. I work primarily with youth and adolescents, and my specialty is working in suicide prevention.
Awesome. Very, very excited to have you. And that is a perfect opportunity to say there are going to be some trigger warnings for this panel. We are going to be talking about suicide, self-harm, and death, obviously. Yeah, just a heads up for that, guys. And I would like everyone to know we don't want to have anybody trauma dumping, for lack of a better term, in our chat, because not everyone is consented to be hearing that. So just be aware of that. If you are, however, going through a really hard time, or you're dealing with something, or maybe this panel brings up something you'd like to talk about, absolutely you can come through to our Discord. We have a entire channel called Party Heal, where you can come and chat. And we don't have any therapists in there, obviously, but we do have lots of amazing community members that are there to listen and chat. So please feel free to pop by and say hi to everybody. Wonderful. Well, thank you again, Em, for being here. Very excited.
My pleasure.
And thank you for you proposed this topic when I came to you.
I know we'd been chatting a bit about it when you came and guested with us, and you were like, "We got to do this," and I was like, "Absolutely." Sounds like a great plan to me.
So stoked. So yeah, very excited. So let's get introductions on everybody here. I'm Krista. I'm a regular Dork Tales team member here. I use she, her, or they, them pronouns. Oh, I'm sorry, Em, I didn't ask your pronouns.
Oh, that's okay. My pronouns are she and Faye.
Fantastic. Faye, F-A-E?
Yes, that's right.
Fantastic. Love it. I'm she, they, with a T-H-U-I. Let's go around the circle on the Twitch chat that I can totally see. So the next up is Caitlin. Hi, Caitlin.
Hello, I'm Caitlin. You've probably seen me around Dork Tales a few times. I use she, her pronouns. Just a couple, don't worry about it. I go by Petite Medic on all social medias. And this panel really stood out to me because I'm a nurse, and I particularly like to it's not that I enjoy dealing with palliative care. However, it does bring some sort of feel good to me. It's something that I do actually enjoy exploring, and I do think and talk about grief and death a lot and ponder it. So I'm really excited to discuss this with everyone here.
Oh, that's awesome. It's going to be a really good point of view to bring into this, which is really exciting. Well, thank you for being here, Caitlin. I think, is Jen next in my thing here? Sure. Hi, Jen. Sure, you're next. Hi.
Yeah, hi. So I'm Jen. I use she, her pronouns. And I volunteered for this panel because I am the type of player who really enjoys the catharsis that comes from, Kelly's nodding, just big nods there. I enjoy the catharsis that comes from any sort of character trauma. It really helps me work through my own trauma. So,
Awesome.
times.
Well, fantastic. We're very excited to have you here. Thanks for coming on. Hi, Kelly.
Hi, I'm Kelly. This is my channel. I use he and him as my pronouns. I'm excited to be here tonight because personally, I've been on both sides of the screen in terms of being somebody who has used or helped other people through grief and processing using tabletop role-playing games, and have used it myself to try to process a lot of grief in my personal character backstory. And I mean that in the best way. I know a lot of people might not think that that's a good thing, but Jen and I working together on much grief processing has been very fun over the years.
I think that speaks to the fact that D&D is therapeutic without actually having it be capital T therapy. I do D&D that I use D&D as a therapy tool. I'm trained to do that. But D&D can be therapeutic without it actually being therapy, which is rad. And I'm glad to hear that it works through that for you. That's awesome.
It's been very helpful. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to hearing about like your professional opinion on that, and like how you like all of that. This sounds so interesting.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Can't wait. Let's dive in. Let's do it.
Fantastic. Awesome. So yeah, we're going to dive in. If any of you guys do have some questions about anything that comes up in the chat, please feel free to put it down. I'll note it. We'll try to answer as many as we can. I think we're sticking around for an hour tonight, so we'll try to power through everything.
As long as y'all want to go, basically.
Fantastic.
An hour for sure.
Okay, minimum an hour. Fantastic.
I can go to like, yeah, I mean, I'm a night owl by nature, but I mean, like, you know, let's do it. Let's dive in.
Cool. Well, something that I found really interesting, Em, when we were kind of talking before stream started, was you saying you have your 6 pillars of grief?
Yes, I do.
Let's start there. I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, and I think that we'll be able to kind of like tease them apart. So laying a little bit of groundwork before I like lay out the 6 things about why people care about death in RPGs is that like we as human beings recognize our own mortality. Right? Like we recognize that everybody dies most of the time. Like we recognize mortality, we know that everybody dies.
Elvis.
Unless someone's discovered cryogenics and they haven't talked about it yet. But the question when it comes to RPGs is like whether we can handle this in fantasy escapism. Can we handle death? Because we as human beings don't really have any idea of what death is like in real life. D&D often offers us an outlet to explore our own curiosities about death. Because people can exist in an in-between state. You can be dead and come back, which can happen as a human being, but we often don't have the narrative or fully cognizant experience of what that is like we do in RPGs. And death is permanent in life, and in D&D it's not. So the feelings and fear that we have with death carry over into the fantasy realm. Death in any constant brings stakes into a game because death can happen in and out of combat. And something that brings stakes to a table is if the game feels deadly. It may not be deadly, but if it feels deadly, the characters are going to invest more in it. And by far, character death is one of the most potent teachers at any TTRPG table when it's used sparingly. If death is overused, it just becomes a byproduct of like a bad time.
Meaning anything, yeah.
Absolutely. And then your players stop caring. We're going to talk about that in a second. So like death is often unexpected because you didn't start the game in that evening or that day expecting that a character was going to die.
Yeah.
So the game is often so complex that no matter what happens, no matter if nobody did anything wrong, characters can still die. And it can encourage your players to play their characters as very like in the moment people rather than plotting how they'll play a couple levels down the line. And even near death in-game experiences can be catalysts for in-game character growth.
There is, I don't know if you're familiar in the Dimension 20 fandom, but there is an effect called the Episode 2 effect, because in Episode 2, it gets real deadly for a lot of the characters, and they almost have a TPK in the second episode of the first season of the stream.
Absolutely.
And it makes them play different. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And it's like it's the fact that like we can cognizantly be aware of the fact that these characters have chosen a life of adventuring. Yeah. They have chosen a life where they are like committed to engaging in a system that categorically sets them up for loss. So we as players are choosing to potentially put our small babies that we have put so much investment in on the line. They could have chosen to be farmers, cobblers, merchants. No. They chose to be adventurers where death is then part of the job description. So therein lies one of those first pieces about consent. Death is done best when there is consent around it at an RPG table. These characters like adventurers, especially if you're playing like a longer going campaign, are often choosing to sacrifice themselves for the larger cause, even if they're not dying. They're putting themselves in situations where they're going to sacrifice themselves for the larger cause, which raises the stakes for us as players because we become particularly invested in them not dying, and thus fulfilling the larger cause, which is the bidirectional relationship between the player and the character around death. And also too, right, like DMs, or in D&D, there's a lot of built-in mechanics where we try and skirt or avoid death, right? Like there is death saves if that was in real life and you got hit with a sword that bad, you'd just be dead. That would be it. But death saves or stabilizing medical checks, using spare the dying as a cantrip, RPGs go against what we have learned through books and movies growing up, particularly around the case of like plot armor. All of the main characters that we have known from our childhood don't die in stories. And we can experience when they do die in an RPG, it gives us something super, super impactful because we're coming into contact with something that is like Shakespeare over Disney. And that's the like, we live a Disney life when it comes to stories. And then all of a sudden we get this like Shakespeare moment of like, oh shit, my character's dead now. What happened?
What do I do? What do I do?
How did we get here? Exactly. Yeah. And it's often the DMs often use NPC death to remind the PCs that they're vulnerable, using the stakes of death without directly affecting the party. The first death often reminds the party that they're vulnerable. Somebody dying in front of them reminds the party that they're vulnerable, or a village being wiped out by something reminds the party that they're vulnerable too. Consequences have to be present. If something dies, the world continues on, and something has to happen in its wake, because that's how it works in the real world. Otherwise, stuff doesn't seem real. So yeah, it's super interesting to see how a particular table handles death, because even the games themselves have like different mechanics for how death works. Like some games, there's like tough luck, no way back from death. You're done. Some games are like exceedingly easy to be resurrected. Some games there's no death at all. Some games, like you go on a journey to avenge a person after death. And then we kind of settle on this like moderately difficult resurrection, which is what D&D 5e does, at least. It's like a resource-based or ability-based, but requires high levels of both. It's emotionally impactful at low levels when death is very close and the stakes are very high. You get one shot by a goblin, like at level 1, and you're level 1 wizard, you're done. Like you've got no cleric in your party, and you're not close enough to a temple, you don't have enough money to do that, you're done. That's it. If your tables do make it to high levels, that's also another question that your table has to deal with, because it's like, what is the investment here as a character to have each death seem important? Blackwater right now is the table I play at is a level 16 party. We have 5 PCs at the moment. 4 of them can heal. And every death is still impactful. In some way, shape, or form, every death is still impactful because we care about these characters so much. Yeah. And the stakes are raised around them so that when a death happens, there is a consequence to that. So that's something that occurs at the table. But yeah, I am so fascinated with how tables deal with death. I play a grave cleric because I love that. And I am fascinated with the concept of the fact that like my cleric holds the line between life and death. Like that is what her job is. She's the high priestess of her religion. Like that's what she does. So it's
and we have Kel, who is a regular appearance here, who is aiming for most deaths on stream of all time.
I love that for them.
She wants to die hard with a vengeance.
Absolutely.
Many times. And I think TK Digiboy mentioned that like their character right now is based in like their entire race has died and they're the only one left. And there's a reason the trope is tragic backstories, right? Is death drives you. Death can be that so many adventurers start with a death.
No one well-adjusted is going to go spelunking to fight a lizard the size of a school bus, right?
Exactly.
Well, and it's the fact too that often if we have experienced death in our lives as humans, it was often probably really tragic, really painful, very rarely our choice on how we contacted death. So by putting death in our backstories as characters, we get to touch the concept of death with our own consent. We get to decide how much of death we want in there, which ways we will allow it to impact our characters and thus ourselves. And also, like, how deep do you want to go in that death? Do you want your characters to have just died over and over again? Do you want to play a revenant? Like, do you want to like live an undead life? What that's something that's so fascinating to me, is that how we choose to exist in concert with death.
I met my girlfriend in an online text RP.
Yeah, we love online text RPs,
right? In a world where everyone played like a newly built pantheon of gods, and and everyone kind of took on a different role, and they took on death. Yeah. And became death incarnate because they had dealt with so much death in their life that was their therapy of like, no, I'm gonna fucking be death, and I will decide what death means and what it means in the universe that I have built.
So I have a question on that. So it's focused on D&D, but I'm wondering, and what your opinion on it and what everybody else's opinion on it is, on the idea of death as an anthropomorphic concept. Because now you're saying you're playing a grave cleric. What god are you playing? How does that influence the game? Is it a god of death or a god of the dead? And there's so many different flavors mythologically.
Oh, totally.
Like in our homebrew setting on Dork Tales, the actual, we've got 3 gods of death now, and I'm asking because Amy's in the chat right now.
Oh yeah,
my girlfriend's also in the chat. Hi, fake
Esther. one of which is the god of the dead, who is this adolescent god whose whole kind of vibe is that he's an orphan from the previous pantheon that existed prior to the world reset, and he's lonely. And that's the whole, like, when you die, you are going to his side. It's a very comforting thing. And then there's an undead god who kind of worked his way up through legal litigation and became a lich king, as you do.
As one does.
But if you need money, he'll loan you money for service.
Absolutely.
Like $1 million now for 1,000 years of service. That
sounds like a lawful evil to me.
Right, and he's gonna win in the end. And then most recently, Amy in the chat knows of a character, because of no spoilers, who became a quasi demigod. The right hand of the basically became a psychopomp god.
Yeah, fun times.
Ushers souls, right? So, like, how does that work with everybody, with you and everybody else? Like, how does it make it different when death is a person?
Oh, we love that. I'm happy to hear other people's first, but I'm also happy to jump in whatever y'all like.
Well, because you're not playing a death god, Caitlin, are you? Or a death cleric?
No, I'm playing a blood cleric.
Blood cleric.
Queen. Yeah.
Right.
Christine's playing a monk of death who punches people to heal them. So that's a
way of mercy. Yeah, that's fun.
Well, and I like that concept of, like, she's there to help people that should continue on and help people that should stay, and it is that idea of, like, finding that balance of there is a time to go and there's a time to stay. And I think that's a thing a lot of people talk about.
Yeah, I mean, most of my experience is in World of Darkness stuff, of course. I have some D&D experience, but I like, and actually it's a good question for later, but I want to say it now to get it out. The differences between, like, D&D, death in D&D, where you do have all of these ways to come back, and how I actually don't like D&D because of some of that. It's not that I don't like D&D, it's that I like it less. And then World of Darkness, where, again, I'm just a player who loves character trauma, and I can pile that on in World of Darkness. So that's an interesting topic for later. But anyways,
well, Jen, like, what recently happened to you and Robin's characters and all of that with, like, breaking tradition, like, that was really interesting to watch, because you got to see someone who had only played D&D before have to deal with real life character death in a game where there were no takebacks, and it was like, oh, this is educational.
Not just death, but murder. So
big old murder.
Some stuff there. Also, by the way, in that scene, the words came up that I had killed someone before came out of my mouth, and that wasn't in my character's backstory at all. just kind of came out there. I was like, all right.
She just didn't tell you.
Yeah, right. But say from Mage the Ascension, which of course is the game I'm most familiar with, you have the Euthanatoi. And they are all about that balance, that that kind of wheel of fate sort of aspect where they are bringing balance to the world. And some people, there is a time to die. There is a rote that is time to time to die, essentially, which is, when is that person supposed to die? Is it now?
Yeah. They're like checking their watch. Like, is it right now? Is it soon?
Can we just speed this up a little?
Yeah. I think that's a really interesting point you bring up, Jen, about the like multitude of ways in which D&D you can heal, because we're scared of dying. So they built mechanics into the game to avoid it. Like off the top of my head, and by off the top of my head, I mean in the notes that I have carefully prepared before this panel, healing magic is able to be cast by multiple classes: paladins, druids, clerics, bards, rangers, way of mercy monks, divine soul sorcerers, celestial warlocks, ASMRs with healing hands, high-level wizards with a wish spell, and certain aspects of necromancy, as well as healing potions and items that you can pick up at any shop for the right amount of money. So, like, we're all worried about our mortality. Generally, in the party, someone is going to be able to heal, regardless of party makeup. The closer you get, go ahead, Kelly. Go ahead.
I was going to say, or you wait an hour and your arm goes back on, basically, right? Like, you take a short rest and you're fine, right?
Mm-hmm.
I got hit by a bus, but I sat down
or and that even plays into what, 4th edition, where you just kind of went and you were fine.
That feels more accurate than the hour.
Yeah, like a second wind. I'm a fighter. I got this. No,
I bandage myself. I'm like, I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm great.
And then in like World of Darkness stuff, you've got mage, where you can have life mages, but they need to be high level life mages in order to really affect anything and to keep you alive. So you work harder for life in World of Darkness type games. And
I feel like that also, that like I feel like it could really tie into the idea of like having your god that is a death deity, would also kind of tie into mage, right? Because like you decide what that means, right? And if having a personified version of death that you pray to, then kind of ties all that in of like, what does that mean to you, and why are you choosing to pray to that as your character, instead of saying, oh well, I use modern medicine, but it's just better because I have life magic.
Gods make death dying better,
Yeah, mage is all about that personal choice, right?
Yeah.
It's nice to know there's something behind the curtain.
Yes.
That's going to help you on the other side.
Yeah, you asked about, how Callie was asking about how we do that in our game. So when we first started our campaign, we started as level 5s. It was supposed to be a one shot, and then surprise, it's now a 4.5-year-long campaign. As they all do. I came to my RDM, who's my husband, Tim, and I was like, hey, I want to play a grave cleric. You cool if I homebrew a religion for you? And he was like, yeah, great, have fun. And so I did. I just created an entire religion where the goddess of so my goddess is, her name is Nepthisiket. She is the goddess of the moment between life and death. So in our campaign, the Raven Queen is dead. She was killed. And we are dealing with the consequences of that. She wasn't killed by us, the party, but we've had some unfortunate interactions with her. She's now the matron of vengeance. Things have gone awful, very off the rails. But so Nepthisiket's whole thing is that those who are supposed to stay alive. And that's what your healing magic is for. The dead, stay dead. Undeath, very bad. Vampires, very bad. Zombies, very bad. Liches, super bad. So basically, like, your job, like my character Nepentha, as the high priestess of the religion, her job is to stop, like to hold the line, to be the arbiter of the balance between the moment of life and death. And Nepthisiket is essentially, when someone dies, their their souls pass through, and she ferries them off in another direction. And their order is this group of essentially sequestered nuns who live in a temple in the middle of a desert. They're all tieflings, and people go there to die. That if they need a safe or calm or place where they can go peacefully, they will go to her temple. They will go to the temple of Nepthisiket in the middle of the desert. They'll make a trek, and they will die there peacefully on their own terms. So it's been a really cool way to explore, for me, death in the game as the cleric whose job it is to uphold the line between what lives and what is dead. So
There's a lot of zeal that goes into that, isn't there? Like
there is, and a lot of like righteous conviction about it too. Neppy, everyone calls her Neppy. Her full name's Nepentha, but everyone calls her Neppy. Neppy started off as a very like black and white character who had very strong rules about alive, dead. That's the only difference. And then understanding that the world doesn't exist in black and white. Like you can live sequestered in a temple for 30 years of your life and be very wise, but not worldly. So now most of her journey has been going out into the world and understanding the nuance of how people interact with death, and doing her job as best she can, which has been a beautiful narrative arc for me as the person who plays her. And D&D, like mechanically, has never been good with death. Like some in older editions, was like exhaustion after you're resurrected. I think that's how it is now. There's level draining in older editions as well. But now most of these things are often done narratively at the table. And then of course you've got like your specific spells that bring stuff back in game. You've got like resurrection, but like what are the ramifications? Does someone have? How long were they dead? Like what ramifications happen when they're brought back 30 years later with like a true resurrection spell? Or something as absolutely chaotic as reincarnation, which druids can cast, like forcing a character to think about who they are beyond what they look like on the surface. Because we, as when we create these characters, so much of them is about their aesthetic, and will die on like you can mess with a D&D character in a lot of ways, but don't take their stuff and don't make them look different. Like that's the two things that will often bring you so much player grief.
And so much of D&D races are based on the community of that race, right? Like
yes.
You're an orc, you're going to build your character around being an orc.
Things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or if you're like in our world, tieflings are, the sense of tieflings are kind of from one place, very much from this one peninsula. And if you like, I remember my character Neppy saw a tiefling when we were up in this like completely snowy mountain continent, very far away from where, she's from. And she's like, what are you doing here? How did you get up here? And so, if a character is reincarnated as a way of bringing them back, it often can promote character growth in really surprising or unexpected ways as they navigate their new life after coming back from the dead in this new body that doesn't look at. Are they the same person when they look different on the outside, which says a lot about how we exist in our own skin as humans, because D&D is just the most beautiful microcosm of humanity that there is out there.
Oh,
absolutely.
I was gonna say with all like with when Kelly was saying how is it different when death is a thing, is a person, is a god. Well, it does really harken back to how humans have kind of coped with death for forever. Every single civilization, every single religion. Oh my god, my computer needs to be plugged in or I'm going to disconnect. Sorry,
let your computer die.
Yeah, no kidding.
Oh my god, your computer's getting into this.
Your computer knew what we were talking about today.
Caitlin,
so
only you can decide if it lives or dies.
I took the note. Your computer took the note. That's what
exactly.
It is.
It wanted to be a part of it.
Or does it start talking too?
Of course, yeah.
Okay, all right, we're good.
You're good?
Slapped a bandage on it and it's golden, right?
Your computer took an immediate short rest. I like that.
Yeah, exactly.
I think she used Revivify.
Yeah, I think I've lost my train of thought by now. But
you were talking about anthropomorphism. You were
bouncing off my death as a person.
Yeah,
into
exactly.
something.
Oh, we're good.
You were talking about cultures.
Yes. Just because a lot of what D&D takes from is a lot of views on death in different cultures, and the god of death, or whichever way it is it the god that rules the underworld? Is it the god that takes them by the hand, the Grim Reaper? Is it the one that ferries them across? They've all been different beings, and they're all represented in some way in D&D, which is really fun to say which flavor are we going with.
Like what type of death do you bring to the table?
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, like the deck of many things, death shows up.
You can
fight him. Like,
and heaven forbid if anybody else get involved.
That's the problem with anthropomorphic gods, though, right? If they exist, you can punch them, and if you punch them, you can potentially defeat them, and if you can defeat them, blah blah blah, right?
I think that plays into it exactly, right? Where like that maybe that's the problem in one way, but it's also in a therapeutic kind of way of like, you know what? No, I'm going to go defeat death.
Yeah.
And
it's a triumph. It's a triumph, right?
Somebody's
exactly.
And I think that, like there's often, if we're taking a concept from like tarot cards, when we talk about death, we don't necessarily just talk about death. We talk about new beginnings also. So oftentimes when we interact with death in game, what we're actually doing is we are using something it's a self-reflexive technique of reframing, which is a therapy technique where we try and rewrite a narrative around how we experience something. So, you go into therapy, you talk about a really awful instance that happened when you were younger, and you and your therapist work to process through it to allow you more agency, autonomy, and allow you to work through it and feel better about it. Working with death in game allows us to rewrite our narrative about how we interacted with death. We get to, again, control and consent how much we touch death. Which is often not what we get in real life. Death just shows up and says, surprise, here I am. And that person you care about is gone in one way, shape, or form, which is not often what we want. So, and I think, this talking about grieving as well. When we grieve in RPGs, it is an approximation of grief we've experienced in real life. Related to death or otherwise, everybody in the world knows what loss feels like, whether that's babies or children experiencing the loss of a toy, the loss of an experience, the loss of something they want. When we as adults, we have like such beautiful, complex emotions that are all sorts of colors and shades, but our brains, when we experience death in a D&D game, cannot tell the difference between the real world and the fantasy world. It's all of the same neuroreceptors are going, all of the same neurotransmitters are firing, especially when you're invested enough, when you're in flow with your table and the immersion is high. When there are stakes, vulnerability, and you feel safe, the grief you will feel when someone dies and they can't come back, astronomical. I think of a moment, it was one of the very first deaths we experienced when we started streaming our game, because we started streaming Blackwater halfway through the campaign. We had played 70 sessions as a home game. And then when the pandemic happened, we were like, oh, we can just play online. Oh, we can just stream it. And then we did. And so I think it was episode 3. Nepentha returns to her temple for the first time in like 2.5 years and sees her mother figure, the mother superior of the order. It's this beautiful reunion. She's introducing them to her new partner. And it's just like this wonderful welcoming home. And there's supposed to be like ceremony and celebration and stuff. But the temple was attacked by creatures from the abyss and a former high priestess who had been corrupted by a lich. And that former high priestess killed the mother superior. And like Nepentha went to raise the dead and bring her back. And Mother Hade chose not to come back. So like this character who I'd never met in game at all. My character hadn't been back to her temple. I had like written about her in a backstory. I'd never met her in game. And when our DM Tim was just like, he was speaking as Hade and saying, like, I'm choosing not to come back. I like felt this, like someone had taken a wine cork and put it in my sternum and was yanking. And it was like, how I don't even know this character. And here I am full weeping on the internet at like 10:30 at night because this mother figure that I've interacted with for 10 minutes is dead.
Sounds like a normal night to us.
Sounds like a normal D&D night, right? But like we cannot tell the difference. And those feelings are turned up to 11 for folks who feel in a place of emotional safety at the table. The alibi line between person and character is very thin. That bleed line, very, very thin. So, those big feelings are much more salient because it feels okay to be vulnerable and be in character about the death, especially when it occurs in high stakes context. And like every death that we experience in Blackwater, pardon me, right now, like every resurrection ritual, someone's in tears. Like it's so intense. And like everyone who plays D&D knows that feeling of like what happens when someone is dying and you're trying desperately to save them and you don't even know if it's going to work. So yeah, it's a big feeling place. And I think I think there's so much like setup. We'll talk about that. I'm assuming some point this evening. Talk about the setup that needs when you need to deal with death appropriately in your game as both a DM and a player. But you mentioned off the top, and we're getting to it, the 6 pillars of death in RPGs. Here we go. I'm excited.
We're only 40 minutes in, and we're starting our first topic.
This is so great. I love this. Classic,
this has been amazing. This is
classic
so
panel.
The chat is having an existential argument.
It's incredible.
And I'm just shit posting in the chat, like, what if not? Just trying to rile them up.
Absolutely. Also, thanks for the shout out, Kelly. If you want to come watch my Grave Cleric come deal with the existential crisis, so please come on and hang out with us. We play every Saturday night live at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time every week. Yeah, we're on episode 94 this week, so there's 94 episodes on YouTube as well as all of our backstory there. But I'll talk about it.
So you're competing with our mage game, I see.
we usually raid each other, right?
Yes, we do. We usually raid each other. Y'all are the best, and we're all local people. Be here in BC, right. It's a good time. Okay, here we go. 6 pillars of death in RPGs. So what I did is when I was coming up with these, I looked across different RPGs at the most salient rules that are written about death. I am a vast consumer of D&D, like so many different campaigns I have watched. I'm also the lore keeper in our campaign, so I rewatch every episode of our Blackwater stuff to take notes and all that kind of stuff. So I feel like, and also, Devil's Luck.
Hey,
Hello, Devils. Oh, I love Devil's Luck.
Devils are here.
Happy finale also. I know you guys had your Firebrand Academy finale tonight. I hope it went so well and that oh my gosh, you guys are the best. Love Devil's Luck.
See you. Okay. You're just in time for the 6 pillars.
The 6 pillars of death in RPGs. These are the 6 things that will allow you.
Such a good metal cover.
Absolutely. It's my metal band. Nobody can take it.
6 pillars of death.
The 6 pillars of death. TM. So the first thing, who died? That's the first thing we want to consider that will impact a table who is dealing with a death. The first death at the table is often the one that sets for the tone with how death is dealt with in the rest of the campaign by both the GM and the players. And then we think about, is this a PC? The first death. Is it an NPC? Is it a villain's death? That's the first death. An intelligent villain who's been an antagonist for the party. Is that the first death that's happening there? Something that I like to think about is that when you're watching The Lord of the Rings, the very first movie, the first death they show you, Boromir. And that sets the tone for the entire rest of the movie. About it, like clutches at your heart, and you're like, "Oh my God, why do I feel that way about him? He tried to steal." Like you don't expect to feel that way about Boromir with what he did before he dies. So we can have to consider who is the death at the table. Number 2, how did they die? You have to consider, what was the death like, because we've got a whole bunch of different types of death when they happen in TTRPGs. You have your heroic death, which is, dying in battle or saving something or someone else. This would be a death serving like a higher purpose or a greater good. You've got a tragic death that occurs not because it's important, but because it's inevitable. This would be the concept of like losing well or playing to lose, which is huge in Nordic LARP, playing to lose. I love it. It's such a good concept. Love to play to lose. I love that. Or a death based on a weakness or flaw of theirs that has caused them to make a poor choice that led to their untimely death, which does not serve a higher purpose, but they are dying for something that they believe in is important, which also is great. And we, at the end of the day, we wish to avoid random or accidental character death.
Avoiding Rainbow Dash land on you, right?
Yeah.
That was in a one shot. It's okay. Everybody
Rainbow
knew.
Death crushes you. That would be an unexpected death.
One shots are the exception to the unexpected.
I think I was paid $50 to kill someone with a My Little Pony or something like that. Yeah. It was during a donation.
It was
stream.
for the kids. You do what you have to for the kids.
Yeah, and we all understand that. We all get it.
It's like you go into Call of Cthulhu.
We go into
Call of Cthulhu.
You're gonna get a paper cut. You're gonna get sepsis. You're gonna.
Absolutely. It escalates quickly. And that's the other thing too, right? Like we want to have our characters avoid pointless death because we want to what's one of the biggest questions I ask in a session 0 where I know death is going to be at the table. What would your character die or risk their life for? Just so I know. I think that's a really important question to ask at a second 0. And also, there is nothing.
Kelly does a really good thing with deaths, or what, like when you're rolling death saves. Is
this thing?
Go, please explain it.
No, go ahead. You talk. It's your. You're the boss. You're the paladin.
It's your thing, though. Anyway, fine.
We're not going to have a Canadian standoff here. I'm American. Do it.
Fair. So yeah, essentially, like when you're in death saves, you know, Kelly says, "Okay, tell me a memory that's worth living for." And in character, you play out that memory, or you explain that memory, and it's like, okay, roll your death save, right? Because it doesn't. If you have nothing to live for,
yeah, you have disadvantage if you can't give me one because you don't have anything to live for. And if it's really good, you get advantage. Make me cry. Make me cry.
I love it. Pull at my heartstrings. I love giving players opportunities to make me cry all the time. I'm like, please make me cry. Please do it. And then because there's also like there's like nothing pulls a player in more than an unexpected death. You want like an unexpected heroic death, or what I would call an escalated death. An escalated death is where things don't seem bad, and then all of a sudden things have escalated very quickly. 3 of you are unconscious and in death saves and your cleric is down. So like, then it's about preparing for your tone shifts, and you're like, it's rather than like, nobody can die. It's like, let's navigate this in triage. Who can die? Yeah. Who needs to be like dead? Who dies first at that point, right? So I find myself in that situation a lot as the cleric healing primary in our party, is that like I am doing what I would call risk management. And it just continually gets messed with because other players are like, no, let me sacrifice myself. No, please let me sacrifice myself. No, please, I'll stand in front of the BBEG and sacrifice myself. And
sounds like a Krista thing. I'm not.
Look at that.
That's a Blackwater. You'll fit right in with us. A Blackwater. That's a Blackwater special. Is like, who let me sacrifice myself more than my fellow players. Because something I appreciate about at our table, and Tim, our DM, does this, is that if a death occurs, there's generally a way back from it. If Tim kills a character outright, and he's only done this once, because it was written into a character's backstory as a bit of a Chekhov's gun, like the player gave the gun to Tim and was just like, please, whenever, like, go for it. But death, when it occurs outright in our games, is a narrative piece, and there's just an extra step that has to be done before bringing the character back. And some of the most challenging moments that we've had as a party are being times when our healing has been blocked, stopped, reversed, or opted out of. So like something has occurred to block that healing. So I think that so that says a lot about like, how did the death occur? Second pillar, how did the death occur? Third pillar, the in-world culture about death. So in your game, what is the narrative and in-world lore about death? How do different races, backgrounds, classes deal with death? Is religion involved? Clerics, deities, how so? How much of an influence do the gods have on death in your games, and how close are they? Says a lot, like will truly govern, how a party deals with death. I think about Blackwater. They travel with the high priestess of the moment between life and death. It says a lot about every death at our party is treated with exceeding care and reverence. Everything is ritualized. It is very there's so much ceremony and stance around death. And Neppy, as much as she's learned to take a quite gray stance on a lot of things, there are some things she's quite hardline about. Like, we had to make a deal with a vampire recently. And the moment we were kind of deciding, he had come to parlay with us, this 2,500-year-old vampire, so powerful, fucking up the world, just absolutely messing everything up. And we needed something from him. So we took a deal with him. And in that moment, Neppy, they were voting whether to take the deal or not. And Neppy was like, I can't vote yes. I need to kill him. I need to kill him right now. And the party was a 3-2 split. The sorcerer, the warlock, and the wizard voted yes to take the deal, and the paladin and the cleric voted no. The most two god deity touched people voted no. So, will we kill him at some point? God, I hope so. I want to stick that vampire so deeply in his heart, wherever the void where his heart used to be. But that is going to now have consequences because Neppy is like, I had to take a hard line. And I don't know how my party feels about that. I don't know how I feel about them walking away from this, knowing that this vampire is going to continue going, just absolutely wrecking things. And we could have had him. We could have had him. And the party's like, no, we all would have died. And I've been like, that's my job. Let me worry about it. So it's like, it's a navigation process. So
we'll die, but we'll deal with it later.
We'll die, but we'll deal with it later. Exactly. So that's like the narrative piece of the in-world culture. And then you also have the DM culture of like, who is your DM and how do they deal with death? Because depending on the table, the DM might institute different rules about death. Like permadeath could be the only option at a table you come into. Rolling death saves might happen secretly rather than publicly. The DM might roll your death saves for you.
That is something that we discuss that before every game. Like, do you want me to do them or you to do them?
Yeah.
Because that tension is delicious. But not everybody can handle it.
But not everybody wants that or can handle that. Some people have a limited number of lives. Often there's rituals around revivification or resurrection magic. And at the end of the day, some DMs are out for the TPK. Is that the table I play at? Absolutely not. But some DMs like that. Some players love that. Some players love, and like I am like fully championing that there is a table for everyone and a DM for everyone. So if you are a person who's like, please kill this character, I can't wait, I got 40 more in the pocket ready for you, there's a DM who wants that.
Yes.
That would be my nightmare as a DM and also as a fellow player at that table. I couldn't handle that.
But that's as a note with everyone, right?
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, 100%. Yeah.
We have a looking for group channel in our Discord.
Yeah.
If that's what you want,
make a post. Go find that.
Yeah.
And if that's how your table works and all your players consent to it, tickety boo, that's great. But narratively, unless there's a way back, maybe they have to go to hell and fight their way back up. They're fighting from the underworld. It can be really disheartening and difficult for a table to process when a TPK happens. And then also you have to kind of think about like expectations of the game. Like if you're playing a module like Tomb of Annihilation or Curse of Strahd, even death is, death's going to happen and you just buckle up your butt and get ready for it. That's the very much the module.
But it's not even the worst thing in that module.
No,
too, right?
certainly
like,
not.
Death is it's the only way out of Barovia.
Death is the only way out of Barovia. There was a question that came through. What about an arrogant death, one that angers the characters and spurns them forward? Oh yeah, like that treads very much the line of like angers the characters. Does it spur them forward or does it make them spiteful? Which can really it like turn caustic very quickly and like really undermine your table dynamics for sure. It's okay. I'm hearing here. No, a character willingly ending their character to put spite to teaching a lesson to the characters, not player being spiteful, but the character. Ooh. That's my brain saying you're in control of the character. And to be careful with hiding behind the alibi of that's what my character would do.
That is that's a dirty phrase on this channel.
Is it?
I hate it so much.
You hate it. Okay.
That's what my character would do. It's your character does whatever, like it's a character.
Oh yeah, okay. You're
no,
like,
I'm agreeing with you.
You're
I'm agreeing with you
100%. Okay, I was gonna be like ready, like let's discuss this.
No. Unfortunately, we're of one mind on this.
Yes, yeah. I think when there's always that, whether you're streaming the game or whether you're playing in your living room, you control the character, right? The character lives in your brain hole in here, so you're the one who's piloting this character. So there is, when it's like a sense of like, that's what my character would do. It's like I don't know. I have a kind of like let's talk about that. That's my inner therapist being like, let's talk about that and dig into it. I don't know.
Yeah, I tend to go for like that's what my character would do as I'm leaning into things.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Can I ask you a question, Em?
Yeah, please dish me.
Okay. No spoilers, but are you watching Moon Knight right now?
I am not actually, but my husband
should watch
is.
Moon Knight and get back to me.
Okay, I will.
Because it deals a lot with DID.
Interesting.
But also death and trauma, and there are some curveballs in recent episodes that are like, I was not expecting Marvel to go that deep. Please watch it and tell me what you think, because it's all about death, the afterlife, and
I love that.
A little bit of inherited trauma, but a lot of experienced trauma.
Interesting. I have, as a
feel-
therapist, I have very strong views about dissociative identity disorder, and that's a
know.
topic for another stream.
Movies don't do it well at all, but this is the best I've seen so far. It is what
Interesting.
it is. It also has
Interesting.
superheroes, so you kind of have to waive it. But like, let me know,
Yeah.
please.
I think committing, like choosing a character death and committing to it is a totally acceptable thing.
Absolutely.
If you're doing it to be a dink, to like make it harder on your other like your other players, like
Consider
don't
your
do that.
motivations. Yeah, consider
Yeah.
your motivations. Why are you trying to so there in group dynamics as a whole, there are 5 stages of how groups work. So this is me porting this over from like therapy groups to putting this onto a D&D party. So you have your like forming stage where everyone's getting to know each other. You have your storming stage where everyone is testing each other out and like you're doing those things and trying to like work through the shit of being a party. Then you get to your norming stage where everyone agrees about this is how we act as a party. Then you have your performing stage, which is, and then your adjourning, which is when you end. But performing is the stuff that feels good. That's like that, ooh, we are in flow, we are immersed, I am here, I am emotionally available, I am ready to engage with this, and I'm like so in it. But pushing a character to punish other characters or players in that instance with a death, that it takes the group and it yanks them from wherever they were back into a storming phase, because you have dropped a bomb in the middle of this party and now you're saying, I'm gone, I'm not going to deal with that.
It's very manipulative in a way that I feel like a lot of people that have had any form of bad relationships with people that like to throw that at them as threats to a relationship could be very triggering.
Death as a threat in RPGs is a toxic substance. It's caustic. It'll eat the party away from the inside out, and once it eats the party, it'll eat the players, and then you're done. Like
I think that ties into Amy's question of asking about how would you go about dealing with topics such as suicide and grief, attempted or otherwise, in PCs or NPCs.
Okay, great question. Thank you so much for asking this. And I can speak to this with a bit of a like, I have some background in this as a suicide prevention therapist and someone who is quite steeped in how to work with suicide, and also the media guidelines around suicide out there. So when dealing with suicide in an NPC, DMs should be careful that is not a trigger for the table. First and foremost, you make sure that is cleared in your session 0. Also asking is an ongoing aspect of consent, because consent is dynamic and fluid and can change at any time. That should be a constant thing that should be checked in about. Because maybe someone at the beginning of the campaign wasn't experiencing suicidal ideation, but life happens and stuff can get bad really quick, and people can start experiencing that at any point in their life. Suicidality can manifest in anyone. So when I think it should be done with care and with reverence. And it should never be a joke, ever. It should not just be a cop-out or an offhand. There has to be meaning behind it. There has to be meaning behind the reason why you as the DM you are choosing, active making a choice to have this character have killed themselves, or this NPC have killed themselves. Now, if you are wanting to touch on suicide as a PC, or to take steps towards ending your character's life, we again have to acknowledge that this is you as the player choosing to take steps towards ending your character's life, because we cannot hide behind the alibi of it's what my character would do. No, this, including suicidality in your games, is an active choice, knowing it could be harmful to a lot of people. So it has to be done with care, and it has to be cleared with the table. Absolutely has to be cleared with the table. It can be a sense of like, talking to the DM about it first and being like, no, the DM. And I think that if that is your hill to die on, that if like, pardon the pun, the humor gets real dark amongst suicide prevention therapists. So so if your desire to have your character kill themselves, whatever the reason, and your DM says that's not going to be, I don't think we can do that at our table for safety reasons, and that's not okay with you, you shouldn't be at that table, because that's you pushing for an instance that's going to make other people unsafe. If that is a narrative you have to work out, find a table that's okay with that, because there is one out there. And if this is something you're like, I have to work through this in D&D, I would challenge you to think of, why do you need to work through this in D&D when you should probably be doing this with a mental health professional? Because you are putting your fellow players and you're putting your DM in a situation where they're acting as your therapist.
I see this in social media all the time.
All the time.
Or write fiction. Write fiction. If you need to process and get it on paper or something, like if you needed to play out exactly your way, write it.
That's what a book is, you know?
I do that so often.
Yeah, if you have a plot point that needs to be written out that you know can't be in your games, or is part of your character's backstory that your DM is like, well, and you need that on paper, write it for yourself. Keep that in your, like, awesome. But oftentimes I would avoid it at the table, because it's just like, unless that's totally clear with you in your session 0, it just like can't. It has so much potential to hurt. Absolutely. More than just be the part of your story.
Let's go back to point 4. Pillars.
Point 4. Yes.
I'm sure we have more to say about this as we go.
I have so many thoughts on suicide right now, and
we almost needed that to be an entire panel just unto itself.
Well,
mental health in TTRPGs, I can talk about. I do consulting work. I do consulting work about so, you know, please hire me to work on your games. If you're creating a new TTRPG, please hire me to come read over your games and make sure you're not doing bad things about portraying mental health in your game. Please come hire me for do that. Grief, I think grief can be worked through really wonderfully in a game in a safe way, touching on the other point that this wonderful person was talking about with the question. But suicide, that's a tricky wicket, so just be careful with that one. Okay, next point about next pillar of death in TTRPGs. Point 4 is, what is the outworld culture on death? So how do the people at the table, have they interacted with death? How do they deal with death? Because cultural views and personal belief, where you live, who you grow up with, influence how we deal with death, which influences how we deal with death in RPGs. Some players are very, you know, much that sense of like, death must be my choice to actually die, which I think, you know, some of the like resurrection rituals add in this little layer of consent, that like a resurrection ritual can succeed, but at the end of the day, it's the player's choice not to come, whether they want to come back or not. Like my raised dead on Mother Hade succeeded, but she chose not to come back, which is again her moment of consent as an NPC. And you know, some players run towards death, whether that's in combat or in other things, and some players fight like hell to avoid it. So our own views on death can actually conflict with our characters too, which can create a bit of cognitive dissonance in us that feels uncomfortable, that we often have to process and through bleed with working through stuff at the table. And grief is also understood in cultural context. Different cultures and different things that we have experienced as people hold different spaces for how we deal with grief. Like even, you know, we think about burial rituals or what people do with their dead, or you know, is there a wake, is there a ceremony, is there a funeral, does anyone, like, what happens around the way that we as human beings and what we grow up with death influence how our characters portrayed in games. So my family growing up, we didn't talk about death. Person died, and then that was kind of it. We just didn't talk about the feelings associated with death at all. So I think that there was a lot of stuff that I worked through, not to mention a myriad of other things with Neppy, but her order, when someone dies at their temple, their life is celebrated. There is a huge party. The priestesses go swimming. Everybody gets drunk. It's a great time. It's a beautiful celebration of this person's life. And their ashes are contributed to a grove through cremation that grows beautiful trees at this oasis in the middle of the desert. So like a celebration of life. Everything is talked about. It is a very emotionally open space.
Yeah. Are they fruiting trees?
They are.
Okay, I was about to say there needs to be that I had a feeling. Sorry.
They fruit and then the priestesses take the fruit. So there's a temple, Philenis is my the home temple, and there's this giant oasis full of white water. It's like imagine a milk bath. It like looks like that. And then they take the fruit and then they take the water from this oasis and they ferment it, and it creates a hallucinogenic beverages that the priestesses drink and engage in like visions and rituals and stuff. So
amazing. I love it.
So it's like this beautiful ceremony around death and celebrating the life that truly bears fruit for the people going forward. So that's and I think my family's lack of ability to deal with death when I wrote this for Nep, when I put that as part of Neppy's backstory, was just like, we are celebrating. It is a full out celebration. There is a fervor with death. So yeah, go ahead.
Just to kind of go off the family bit there for a minute, because actually this just made me realize something that I'm like, oh, in hindsight, hindsight's 2020, right?
Do we learn something?
I learned something.
Learning things.
Jen, what do we learn?
So something that I mostly just didn't make the connection, but in my family, first of all, my father probably had undiagnosed ADHD and had zero emotional regulation. So, that was a good time. But my mom wasn't super great at talking about it either. And when my grandfather died when I was about 8, I flat out refused to go to his funeral.
Yeah.
And something I realized later that I didn't connect with that until just now was that especially as a kid with ADHD, now that I know that, and my own emotional dysregulation, I tend to absorb emotions from other people.
Yeah.
And so something like a funeral would be immensely
would be a sensory overload for you.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
But the table is a place where I actually have a barrier between me and that.
Your alibi.
So I can safely explore those emotions. Right.
Yeah.
It's a safe space.
Yeah. I think a couple of people in the chat have made some really good points as well. Iron Warrior X, it's incredible. Thank you everyone for participating in this conversation.
We love this so much.
It's beautiful. The Iron Warrior made a point that they have a trigger of child death, but it's not something they X card in a session 0, because working through it within a game does help. But Abyssal Icarus commented, the other players should also get their consent to, you need the other players' consent to bring that to a table of that kind of weight, because if they can't handle you feeling those emotions at the table, they shouldn't have to. And I think that was what Iron Warrior was saying. It's they do bring it up and express yes, this is the thing that I go through, and I will feel emotions if it comes up at the table. So if you guys don't want it, that's fine, but I'm okay with it. Just know that I'm going to feel a bit.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. That's such a good point, and I'm so glad that we're working through that in chat, because when a table is fully immersed, when you're in a flow state with your table, you have a sense of there is safety amongst everybody at their table. I play with my best friends, and they have been the people who have been there with me through thick and thin, for especially since the beginning of this panini, and it is simply a fact that if I'm going to work through something at the table, we'll often talk about that beforehand, be like, hey, this might be something that comes up in my character's backstory, just be aware. I worked through a lot of lonely kid stuff with my current character. I had no friends growing up. There was no kids on my street the same age as me. And so what did I make? I made a character, Lot, who spent most of her life in a temple. Didn't know anything about the world.
Yes, good to have you here. We're talking about some serious stuff, so just warning you right now. We're talking about death and grief in tabletop games. So come join. Come share experiences. Sorry, Em.
No. So I didn't know that going through, but was able to reflect on that afterwards. So if there is something that people are working through at your table, often what I do as a DM is if I collect backstories from people, I'll often do that ahead of session 0, and I will put things from people's backstories on the thing of lines and veils of are you okay with this, knowing full well that the people who have that in their backstories are going to say, yeah, that's fine. But then and then I can work with the other players to be like, hey, this might not be okay. Can we massage this? This will be unsafe at the table. Let's let's help you tell the story that you want to tell, but let's massage that so to keep it safe. So that's been And I think that ties in really well to our, go ahead, Krista, go ahead.
I was going to say, just as one thing, another point that Iron Warrior had made, a question that they'd had earlier was dealing with resurrecting characters from previous campaigns. So he had played a character, they died, had a good death, went to Valhalla. A year later, in a different game, he played that barbarian's grandson, and the GM pushed a story on the group that required the resurrection of the dead grandfather. So like required resurrecting an old PC. So I have a little bit of experience with this, but from a good side of things, I was in a hunter game, a World of Darkness game, where I played a girl who had been a ghoul in a very traumatic backstory. And
for those who don't know ghouls, think like Renfield from Dracula. Vampire.
Precisely. And so it was a very dark, tragic backstory, but she had been saved and had sort of became a hunter. However, I got a lot of like paranoias put on her that I had to constantly be rolling. Like we were hunting vampires, but as soon as someone said the word vampire, I was rolling like sanity checks. Wow. And so I was like, this character's not playable anymore.
No. And what agency or consent do you have to do that?
Precisely. And so I was really frustrated, and I told the DM, I was like, I'm really frustrated. And he goes, well, this is the situation, this is how it is, so we can't really bring her back. And I was like, no, okay, no. But I was like, I need to play another character then. You gotta get rid of her. And he was like, okay, cool. And so we didn't so much kill her off as like she disappeared in the night.
She went off into the night. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. But so we kind of all assumed she was dead, but he wanted to have a storyline that she was finding her was a very good piece. But he came to me and said, how do you feel about bringing her back?
Oh, okay, that's good.
And like, are you comfortable playing her again just for this scene, like just for this? And I was like, well, okay, yeah, because like now I have a little bit of agency of like, I can decide how to go with this.
Yes.
And it's not, and I also have another character now who can actually
do the
affect
thing.
The world.
Yeah.
So I think in Iron Warrior's question, I think if it's all, in that case, it's all about consent. It's like, if you're okay with it, do it. I think that's great.
For sure. I think that, I mean, we can all trace everything back to consent and conversation and talking like the adults that we are at the table, rather than hiding and pushing things down and compartmentalizing things. Something that is really a sticking point for me around TTRPGs is that the storytelling is a collaborative effort. It is a full table experience. So if one person at that table decides to take the story and I'm going to push this on everybody else, it's not collaborative anymore. And that's a problem that needs to be dealt with, because you will never get out of storming. You will never perform. It will never feel comfortable if you're continually in that constant state of storming. Or if there's like one person at your table that just like yanks you back into that storming phase, like, I thought we processed this, let's do it again. Or like, we processed this 6 times now, let's just bring it back and make this worse. It's just not, it just doesn't work, especially around death. Around
100%. We got about a half hour left at max, so let's move to point 5.
The chat is having a very interesting discussion about whether or not the sanity mechanics in games is
okay. Mental illness as a mechanic in games.
Let's
it's a whole new panel.
Please hire me to come talk about hire me to look over your new TTRPG games, people out there who are writing them. Let me tell you my thoughts on mental illness in games.
You know what? Maybe 100%. let's touch base next time we do this. I would love to hear your thoughts on mental illness and talk about like sanity mechanics and fun versus form.
4-hour block, and we'll just go.
Honestly, it's gonna need that much time, like with like tea breaks and stuff.
Yeah, totally.
Absolutely. I would love to talk to you. I would love to be someone who can talk about from the D&D player perspective, the DM perspective, the therapeutic DM perspective, which I am, and then also the therapist perspective. Let's bring all that to the table. I love it. Okay, point 5 about the pillars of death in RPGs. We will get there. That's one of the things we would talk about on our we had a talk show that we would do to like catch everyone up on the history of Blackwater, all the stuff we did before we started streaming, because there was like 75 episodes of content on there, and we would just be like, Chatwater, we'll get there. This is us getting there. So we're gonna get there. So the next point 5 is what we've actually been touching on a lot about throughout this whole conversation, is investment and immersion at the table. So when you're in immersion, it is that like, it is very easy for you to be in this character place. Like Emma doesn't sit at the table. That's Neppy. like that is Neppy, who, you know, experiences all of Neppy's feelings, embodies Neppy's. Like, I have lived with Neppy for so long that her accent is just like, I could flip into it in like the middle of a sentence if I wanted to, and like step into her so easily, because of how invested I am in her story, how invested I am in our table story, which is also reciprocal amongst my fellow players and our DM, and the care that's put into it. But we also like, we ground ourselves and get into the story. So there's something that, you know, our table is has lots of moments of levity, but we try not to character break as well, and we stay in character. Like, there's bits and jokes and stuff, but like, we're in our character space for that. So when the immersion is higher and your investment in your character game and story, as well as how long the campaign has been running, this often promotes more salient and big feelings about character death. Am I going to grieve the character who dies in session 4 as much as I would grieve a permanent death of my character that I have been playing for 4.5 years, and I have art of her tattooed on my body? Like,
sure, you know, that's not just a throwaway right there. That's probably fine.
Yeah, no, it's totally fine.
Just play her identical sister.
I will say, well, you joke, but there is her like sister figure from the temple. I am the only character, only PC in our campaign who has not died yet.
Wait,
I have not died.
Really, that one? Yeah. That character is the one who hasn't died. You're like, no, it's my job to mind the line, but I'm not going.
Everyone protects Neppy. There is like a line of people that you have to get through before Neppy dies. If
I'm going, I'm not coming back. Well,
and I also have a very powerful item that keeps me alive.
Is it a tattoo?
It's not. No, Neppy carries something called Death's Shadow. It's a Griffin saddlebag item. It's basically like, if I drop to 0 hit points, my body falls down, is encased in shadow that is impermeable and unmovable. A shadow form of myself pops up. I have 100 hit points, and I'm resistant to most damage, as well as immune to necrotic. So it's like, I have an extra pool of 100 hit points. But if I get through that, that's 2 death saves failed, and I immediately have to roll a death save. So it's like, it's bad.
It's all or nothing.
It's all or nothing. Absolutely. So like, if Neppy died and was like permadead, they couldn't get her back. I've told Tim, our DM, I was like, and even though I was like, we've had this talk, because I was like, you're my husband, please don't treat me special at the table. Like, you know, treat me as special as you would everyone else, which is to say he treats all of us very, very special and flirts with all of us equally. It's wonderful.
We have to.
You have to. That's in the rules. That's the rules.
I'm everybody's boyfriend.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Tim's everybody's husband and dad also at our table. It's great. Tim's got a strong dad energy. It's awesome. But like, you know, if Neppy were permadead and they had to like go get her back or something, or her soul wasn't there, I told him, I was like, the character, this is a spoilers for anyone who watches Blackwater, plug your ears for a second if you don't want to hear it. I would go play her sister figure from the temple, and like, because Oftish, who has known Neppy since, you know, childhood, would go, and she's a very high level cleric. She's actually now the new mother superior of the order after Hade died. She would be like, absolutely, I've never left these temple walls, but I will, to go save Neppy. So I think that we have big feelings about death, and like, even talking about having to play Oftish instead of Neppy is like choking me up a little bit, because I'm like, I don't want Neppy to die. She has children and a husband and like a life she wants to live afterwards, you know? So anyway, we're moving on.
Well, and I don't just on the topic of our own like investment, I don't know about other players, but I know like, if I'm in a session and like my character's like not doing great, and oh my god, okay, yeah, they might die, and I do have that brief moment, but I often can't let myself get fully immersed. Otherwise I can't get it back. My bleed gets really, really bad.
Bleed can get so intense. Yep.
And so I know that about myself. So I now, every time I'm almost died, like my character's almost dead, or like I'm rolling death saves, I'm like, fuck, I'm gonna have to buy more character art.
That's your first thought. Yeah. I love that.
Well, and sorry, streaming character stuff, like that's one of my fears too.
Absolutely.
Because like we have such like, our art's
it's so expensive.
It's so expensive.
So is ours.
Yeah,
but expensive.
Exactly.
Like that's where
they're
this
worth every penny.
Yeah.
The down here, this is going to Hayliz. So like, fill it up, folks.
Yes.
I can't afford to keep paying her rent.
Before we move on to step 6, quick
push. We are doing this as a fundraiser for our channel. So if we do have a tip button. So if you want to give us a quick tip for all of this amazing content and to get
Just a
amazing
tip.
people like, exactly.
I just want to know how it feels to have that thing full.
Yeah, Em and I have done a
Sorry.
trade-off. I went and played werewolf with them on theirs, and now they're phase over here with us. So it's friggin' awesome. It's good. So shoot us a tip.
We love trade within the TTRPG community. It's my favorite thing. I've offered to pay people before, and they're like, actually, I'll trade you this point. And I was like, please tell me more about this. Can I pay you more? And can we trade more things? Okay, last pillar of things about death in TTRPGs is also something that we have been talking about, which means it's important: the agency and autonomy of the players to make decisions about their character, which is bidirectionally related to the DM style. So consequences of death and resurrection need to be a conversation between the DM and the player. If your character's dead, do they think their story is finished? The path to bring them back with an understanding that that character may not be the same. And some people can't deal with that in fantasy context. So like, if your player can't deal with that, don't do it. Like, please keep your player safe and keep your DM safe also. Because the DM, as Millie was saying in the previous panel, is also a player too. And I really love, as I was saying before, the incorporation of the idea that the soul must be willing to return, because it adds an extra step of consent for the player and the character to be like, hey, are you ready to come back? Do you want to come back? Do you want to be dead for a while? We had one of our first big PC death that didn't, so our monk, this was before we streamed, so we were level 9 at this point. He died in the middle of a big boss battle, and before the battle, the player Adam said, this was like at the end of a previous session, and maybe it was at, like, I was over at his house like the night before we were going to play, and he's like, Torin needs to talk to Neppy about something. And I was like, you want to do this right now? He was like, yeah, absolutely. I was like, okay, we can do that. Because that's conversations you have with your friends that you play D&D with outside in a non-D&D context. And so
I've had full role-playing sessions in my car, dropping someone off after game.
Absolutely.
So I feel
so have I with Caitlin, actually.
We do that all the time. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so so he said to me that if he dies and if other people are going to die, he's not the choice. Don't bring him back. He was like a man out of time. He'd been frozen in time. His wife and his children were gone. He was doing this to help the party, and to, like, you know, he felt he had abandoned his his regiment. He was a soldier and he'd abandoned his regiment. He felt awful about that. And he's like, I just want to fulfill my duty and I want to go be with my wife and children. So if I die, I'm not the choice. And Neppy was like, no, it won't get to that. Like, don't be silly. Like, we'll be fine. And then he died in the middle. The monster that we were fighting exploded, and he was too close. And like, he got wanted the killing blow, and he was too close, and he exploded, and he died. And I had the option at that moment. I had the ability and the diamonds to revivify him. And my character actively chose not to try to revivify him. So that's something that Neppy has to carry now, and carries every day. Like, she has a son, and her son's middle name is Torin. So like, she grapples with this fact that she has made a choice, like in the you know, and that was something that Adam put on my shoulders. And even though I didn't necessarily want it on my shoulders, I took it and I was okay with that. But now it's something that Neppy has to, you know, deal with the ramifications of. And Adam also, I gave Adam so many opportunities in character roleplay situations to be like, Neppy goes and visits Torin's grave. Neppy prays about this. Neppy prays about that, to give him the opportunities that if he had buyer's remorse about making that decision, that he could come back. So he ultimately chose not to, and now plays with his current character, which is great and lovely. But yeah, he chose a permanent death. And I think that weighs heavily on him still as the player who did that. So, you know,
like you said, there are babies, right? They're our own creations.
Yeah.
And as much as we want them to have that trauma, it's also like, but now you're gone, and I can't.
It's like, and I also want my character to live this beautiful, full, and enriching life. Like,
I mean, Jen did the exact same thing in one of our games. You're thinking several of them. Like, you use so much magic, you evaporated.
The last
What's paradox?
The last like 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes has been me going, okay, so Kelly made my character without telling me until the moment it was revealed I was secretly a spy, and then my character.
You asked for it though. That was consensual.
Yes.
It was consensual. It's important to know.
Yes, I asked that part. It's just the specifics weren't there.
Do you want something bad to happen to you that you don't know about? Yes. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And then that character didn't die, but was then unplayable because she'd been revealed as a spy. So then I played the character that she'd stolen the image from, which was so the same
intense
image, but yeah, it was but completely, she had amnesia. She didn't know what the heck had gone on.
The therapist in me, every time I hear things that have happened to people's characters, I'm like, oh, please go on. I want to hear about all. You know what I mean? Like it's my inner. My inner
you and Jen need to sit
wants...
down and talk about like Pam and Rhea.
I love it.
And then the final game, it was the big confrontational battle between her and the person who had stolen her identity and like pretended to be her and put her in a tube for a while. She was kept as you do. And so I spent willpower to hold my paradox until the end of the scene. And this chat is why I'm Paradox Queen, because I had over 30 points of paradox and just straight up evaporated after the scene, after I killed her.
You got a last line though. You got got like a I'm whole now or something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
Because you took your agency. It was really cathartic. But
yeah,
I want to talk about that too. I want to talk about got me thinking about last line stuff. So I'll finish off point of depth, points pillar 6, and then we're going to talk about how to manage death at the table very quickly. So the more agency and autonomy people have about their character death, the more okay or comfortable they are with the process. It doesn't make the process easier. They're just more comfortable with it. So you can be upset about the fact that your character died, but you can be comfortable with that upset. It's not the problem comes when the death doesn't have any aspect of your consent into it. So yeah, those are my 6 pillars of death in TTRPGs. Who died? How did they die? In-world culture, out-world culture, investment and immersion at the table, and the agency and autonomy of the players to make decisions about their characters. Those are the 6 things that affect death at the table. Now,
I love that.
Now, before we end this panel, at some point, we have to talk about how do you manage death experiences at the table. Because at the end of the day, what we want to provide our players and our table with closure, especially if the death is permanent. You need to discuss feelings. If just discussing feelings is not your thing, you can't do it in person, write it down. Like write it out, do it over Discord, do it over Facebook Messenger, do it whatever you need to, but talk about those feelings, please. For the love of your table, talk about them.
So Em,
yeah,
you talked earlier about your connection with Nordic LARP. Like at least you were cognizant of it.
I love it.
Do you know Sarcophagus?
I don't.
Oh.
I just linked it in the chat. I'm going to tell you a quick story. So we used to book this cabin up island on Vancouver Island, and we would go there for a weekend and just LARP all weekend, do Nordic LARPs.
So fun.
And Sarcophagus, here's the premise for Sarcophagus. This isn't a spoiler because it's all about the playing. Air raid sirens go off in whatever local town you are, and you're brought to a fallout shelter. As you go into the fallout shelter, you're all people from different walks of life. You create your characters, etc. And theoretically, the bombs go off, and then you notice that the intake fans have stopped working, and the doors are broken because there's no power, and you're trapped in a bomb shelter waiting for the air to run out, and that is the game.
Oh, I love it. I love that.
And eventually, the way we did it is, Caitlin, you were in that game, and I had a single, so I had lights originally, and then I had it at the halfway point drop down to a single red emergency bulb, and then I would start having it short out. And it was people just role playing, knowing they're going to die.
Oh,
and
love that.
It was the greatest debrief I've ever had in a game. We did the whole sit around, everybody gets 3 minutes of silence to just talk.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it was just I really want to play 10 Candles.
Have you never played it?
Yes.
I've never played it.
Gosh,
I've never
so
played it.
good.
I really want to.
Why
Have
don't
you
I
played
come-
10 Candles? Caitlin?
I have, yes, I played it.
Where did you
with,
play 10 Candles?
I played
So
it with
fun.
Andre. So yeah, and we
I'd-
played it for Halloween.
I'd come run a 10 candles game for you guys anytime.
I would
There we
love
go.
that. Come to the island. It'll
Oh,
be great.
good.
Hey, well,
Okay.
so I'm going over to the mainland. So at one point we'll all come over and we'll.
You know what? I'm going over in
Absolutely.
October already.
Or we
for,
can stream it. We can stream a game of 10 candles
Yeah?
if you want.
I'm moving to a 5-acre piece of property.
Yeah, we
Come
love that.
camp.
We love that. I love this. Plans. We love that. Okay, sweet.
Perfect.
But if you ever
Get
want
us
to
to 100
stream,
Patreons and I'll film it.
if you
Yes.
ever want to stream a game of 10 candles though and play it on your channel, I will come run
Kinda
it
do.
for you. Okay.
I mean, there's
So
always
discuss
extra
your
life.
They're just discussing feelings. Don't blame or punish the player for their death, even if they had a full hand in causing it. Don't blame or punish anyone, especially if it ended on a dice roll. Please don't do that. Mourn the death. Give space for the death. You need to mourn your character. Even if you know your character's coming back, take 30 seconds to mourn your character's death. That's hard. Whether you're like, I'm a level 16 and every time our paladin dies because she has died the most, Neppy, I mourn that every time. Be Emma personally. So your co-players, the players you play with, also need to mourn as well. Death leaves a space. There is an empty seat at the table. Honor the space. Take a break if you need to, whether that's you cut to break because you're streaming or take a break in a home game. Don't introduce the new character immediately. Oh my gosh, take a second off. If the death is permanent, it can be exceedingly hard, lead to a lot of negative affect between the party. Let there be some space and have the new character come in when it is narratively appropriate. The party will have to restorm. They will have to go back into that storming phase, figure out what it is like without the that character there, and then they will have to re-norm, which will derail flow state. And then once they have re-normed, then let the new player come in because they're going to have to storm again with that new character come in again. As a DM, take a lot of care with narrating the death experience. Allow the player to be involved in that. If it's appropriate, narrating their last breath. If they find a journal, allow your players always to have a journal. Like a character, always have a journal tucked on their body. You open it up. What does their last journal entry say when they're dead? You want to show and you want to tell. Narrate the scene as well as narrate what's happening with the individual. Have the character talk about that. Even if the player's character is dead, tell them what their body looks like in death, if that's okay at your table. What do you find on their person? Is there anything tucked away or hidden before they're buried? This can be especially hard when the combat is still occurring, but try and do a little bit if you can. There is always space to talk about death. Then character death does not happen in a vacuum. There are consequences that happen because of the death, even if they come back, both players in the world itself. In our campaign, our paladin, every time she dies, her goddess is Melora. She feels like she's farther and farther away from the world, and it's harder and harder for her to come back, and she is becoming closer and closer to her goddess, like being the champion of her goddess. So she feels that distance, and she has a wife and a child, and so she doesn't like dying because she doesn't want to be separated from her wife and child, but also knows that if she were to be taken in as champion by her goddess, that would be a very noble thing to do. So it's a constant dissonance about it, which is great. Consequences happen for both the players and the world itself. Show the impact of the death. As a DM, it is imperative that you create meaning and draw purpose and draw stakes about the death. Also acknowledging that grief comes in waves. It will not be a linear process. Both the characters and the players will experience this, so plan accordingly. Care, compassion, just layer that on all the time.
I'm sure Caitlin, I'm sure you've experienced that in droves doing palliative care, is dealing with families and the consequences of it.
Absolutely. And watching each of them go through it their own way and helping them in their own different way that they need to process it and to grieve it is it's very different. It's being with them. Yeah.
That huge point of that everyone grieves differently. So don't force one way of grieving onto someone because it won't work. And then discuss the mechanics around death during your session 0. Huge. Resurrection rituals, permadeath, whatever the table's go-to is, that has to be discussed ahead of time. It has to. Also, you want to discuss how lethal is the table. How lethal do you want it to be as players? What are the expectations around death? discuss your in-world and out-world cultural context towards death that the characters would know or that you as players have. This way, as a DM, you don't have to pull punches because you have the full scope of what your table wants, and you are then thus like continually working from that. Or nobody gets upset when you don't pull a punch, because I as a DM, I don't pull punches, and our DM Tim doesn't either, but that's because he has our consent to not pull punches at all. And you honor the character in and out of the game if the death is a permanent one. Go out for a drink if you do, or like a dinner to like celebrate that character with your friends. Do things with your D&D party outside of play D&D with them. That's another big thing that I have.
Like they're friends?
Like
What?
they're your real friends? What?
Actual friends?
You're not my real friends.
Which can be hard if you live like so far apart, but like watch a movie together or like have a party or something. I don't know.
I had a table that we would ritualistically burn character sheets when a character died.
Love that for you.
And then our DM decided that he wanted all of our characters to come back as the big bads, as like undead versions.
No.
And we're like,
no. But they're
none of us have character sheets.
That's what D&D Beyond is for.
This was 20 years ago.
Pre D&D Beyond. A couple other things that I would recommend is to with your session zeros, if someone doesn't agree about the way that death is portrayed at your table, or rules that you have around death or stuff around, especially around suicide and stuff like that, and they take a really strong stance about it, that might not be the table for them, and that's okay. As a player, you have to be okay with the fact that this table may not be your forever table, and that's just all right. And your players as a DM might not always stick around. It can be a really hard pill to swallow, but you have to stay safe, even if that means leaving your table. Finally, something I would offer to DMs out there is consider a death difficulty curve. So this is at low level, potentially keeping your encounters more balanced to avoid useless death. Mid-level, remove some of those training wheels. Encounters may feel more deadly. The fear of death now has stakes because party cohesion has increased. They care about these characters more. And when I care about other characters, I'm more likely to try and keep them alive. As the cleric, that's a big thing on my shoulders. At high level, take the training wheels off. These players have been playing together for that long. Encounters should have some scare in them, as your party is very powerful and likely has access to very powerful abilities to stop death. Encourage your party to play smarter, to get out of encounters with everyone alive. Running away is almost always an option as a party. So remember that as a player, and allowing space as a DM for player ingenuity makes actual death more impactful, because they've likely been trying to avoid the heck out of it. Because if you die too many times, desensitization to death can occur. And if this starts to happen to the party, there is likely other ways to up the stakes or to maintain elements of danger. Elephants are dangerous too. Finally, my one last thing, and this is a hill I will die on, for lack of better words. As a DM, you cannot kill a PC when the player is not there. Cannot do it. You can't do it.
Or their pets. You don't kill pets either.
Don't
Kelly,
fuck with them while they're not
Dax,
there.
Okay. Hold on.
Everyone is going to riot.
So I will interject real quick about that, because Ginny D just did a special on pets. And her law is, if the pet goes into combat,
that's fair.
Then the pet can take.
Pets in combat.
Fair.
So,
and
so
in
long
my
as
defense, he's technically a spiritual being, and I can summon.
So he'll just come
so.
back.
It's fine. But don't. But DMs out there, don't kill a character when their player is not there. That is no fun. And I don't say a lot of things are bad DMing often, because there's a table for everyone and a DM for everyone. That's bad DMing. That's the hill I'll die on.
100%.
And yeah. No, go ahead, Kelly. You go ahead.
Mine was a tangent. But what were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say that's all the thoughts I have on death in RPGs. At least the stuff I have prepared for this evening.
See, given your focus on death, I'm really curious what you would have thought of this one ridiculous episode of a Mage the Awakening LARP that I ran. Wait till the recognition catches in, where we did a Final Destination time loop plot.
Oh no!
And it was the day reset every time the entire cast died.
Oh wow!
And what were some of the inventive ways? Decapitation by elevator was one.
Oh god!
Isn't that what's that? That's Palm Springs. Wasn't that?
Oh my god, yes.
I haven't watched Palm
yes.
Springs. I really
You
need
gotta
to
watch that.
Oh, dude, it's so
I think
good.
Jen, did you die from rabies because you went in to pet a cat that wasn't a cat?
I don't.
my God,
I honestly don't
did.
remember. There
I
were
don't
so many
remember.
deaths.
It
that
was
game.
just, but it was one of those moments where I think I was really frustrated with the game, and it was really cathartic to kill you all.
Yep.
With
Over
no
and over.
stakes.
Again,
with no stakes.
a table for everyone. If you're a DM who likes killing your players, there's players who like that. So find
Oh.
the right table, but don't kill a PC when the
Don't
player
kill
is
a
not
PC.
there. And
Yeah,
those are my
kill-
thoughts. Those are my thoughts about death in
Those-
RPGs.
We got through them.
We did it.
did.
We got there. We got there.
Fabulous. Well,
I'm proud of you.
some of y'all need to be up early tomorrow to run more of these amazing panels. So let's do a quick round of everybody and where we can find you, and let's go in reverse order and start with Kelly.
Hi, I'm Kelly. I'm tired, and I'm going to go eat dinner after this because I realized that I didn't. So,
Oh, no.
thank you so
Kelly.
much for being here with us. I love you all very much, and
See you tomorrow at 8.
see you tomorrow at 10 to 8.
10.
What
Don't worry,
the
I'm in Extra
shit?
Life. I haven't done one of these since Extra Life, and Extra Life's always early.
He's done
It's-
so many conventions that he's like, no, I'm sleeping in.
That was literally the discussion in the planning chat. I'm like, you know what? Nobody's going to watch before 10 anyway. I'm
No.
out.
You'd be surprised. You'd be
I
surprised
know,
you
I
can
know.
pull in at 6 a.m.
It was
Time
East
zones.
Coasters, right? East Coasters and Europeans are all over that.
There's an 8
But
a.m. now.
But I was sleepy.
Yes, Frogs has
That's me.
requested that Em explain things to us every week. Well,
Thank you so much.
you can find Faye over at Blackwater D&D, which we'll get to in a second. We're going
Yeah,
around. We're
okay.
getting there. Over to Jen. Hi, Jen.
Hi. You can find me on Dork Tales mostly, coming back in Victorian Mage on May 7th, which is super exciting. And I don't know if Chris is going to post that TikTok I sent you, but you
Maybe.
should.
I do apologize for my delinquents and TikTok miss.
Just
but
post
yes,
it
I do
before May
post that.
7th and you're fine. You'll be forgiven.
Okay, fabulous. I'll do that. I can do that. I can handle it. Awesome.
But yeah, so I'm on Dork Tales. I do some stuff. I'll be back tomorrow for some other panels.
Very exciting. We're always excited to have y'all. And Caitlin. Hi, Caitlin.
Hello, I'm Caitlin. You can find me here on Dork Tales, or Petite Medic on like every social media ever. So that's cool.
So
I'll be back tomorrow for voice acting, so you can see me then too if you really
And
want
costuming.
to. And
Heck yeah.
costuming. But
Is voice
costuming's
acting
on
tomorrow? I
Sunday.
thought anyway, I'll check the thing. Okay.
Voice acting is Sunday.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay, good.
Then
I was
costuming's
panicking
tomorrow. I
because
don't know. I don't
voice
know
acting
my
after
days.
makeup, and I was like, I'm not ready for makeup.
We have so
Morning.
many panels,
I
guys.
love this for you all. This is a wonderful thing.
It's a wonderful problem to have. And Em, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you
Where
so
can we
much for
find
having
you?
me. Wow. This has been an absolute treat. Thank you so much for inviting me over to talk about my favorite topic in TTRPGs. So yeah, I'll run through who I am. Hi all. I'm Em. My pronouns are she, Faye, and you can find me over at Blackwater D&D. I run our Twitter. I also run, if you see Blackwater D&D here on Twitch, that's me. I'm around all the time. So I am in real life. Outside of the internets, I am a therapist who works with young people, primarily children and adolescents, in suicide prevention work, as well as other risky behaviors like substance use and self-injury and stuff like that. But on the internets, in the TTRPG space, I am the creative director and cast member over at Blackwater D&D. And I'm also a DM on our wonderful channel too. So I run a couple of our ongoing monthly campaigns, and then we play our main campaign where I've been talking about all evening, Saturdays at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time every week, almost without fail. I don't think we've missed a week in a very long time. So please come hang out with us. We have a plethora of YouTube stuff. Like there's, I think, over almost 2,000 hours of content on YouTube for you. So like, please go dive into all of that kind of good stuff. You can also find me on Twitter at M_Carlson. That's where I am. And also I consult on TTRPGs and also a bunch of stuff. I consult on how to put mental health in things, and how to talk about suicide in all sorts of contexts. So if that's something that you're interested in, please feel free to hit me up. Come follow me on Twitter. Please come follow us at Blackwater D&D. Come watch my sweet little show. I'm very proud of it. And thank you so much for having me. This has been a blast.
You guys are
Great
all
having you.
awesome over at Blackwater. You have an incredible crew. It's so cool to have like not just our own crew, but like we're super awesome. You guys are super awesome. It's so cool to know there's so many cool people out
I
there.
friggin' love you, dorks. You know, I friggin' love you guys. You guys are great.
Magnifies the awesome.
Right back at
Magnificent.
you. Well, I've been Krista. I'm a regular team member over here at DorkTales, and have been super excited to be part of this panel. I'm excited to continue going forward. Another reminder that we are doing this for tips this weekend. So if you got a couple spare bucks, hit that tip button, throw us a couple of dollars. And if you aren't on our Patreon yet, go check our Patreon out at patreon.com/DorkTales. Is that right?
Perks. Get perks.
And there's perks. We are also on a run to 75 patrons, and when we're at 60.
60. Oh, we went up last night by like 2 or 3. So
Hey,
60,
we love that.
Are we at
66?
69 yet?
We're not. I know it's tragic.
Oh.
The nice
Guys,
number.
for
You
only
must,
$1 a month, you could get us to 69.
you must hit the nice number. You must do it. You must.
The phrasing is so good.
That's so good. But once we hit 75 patrons, we are going to be announcing a new and exciting project. We are currently working on our Dork Pod, our podcast, our weekly podcast.
You mean Todd Pod?
The Todd Pod, exactly.
Tide? No, not Tide Pod. That's
Tide
different.
Pod?
Don't eat those. Okay,
Yeah,
don't
no.
eat those.
Don't eat the Todd Pod either.
Yeah, don't even know. Yeah, so we're currently working on that. But yeah, if like I said, throw us some tips if you have a couple bucks. Wonderful, thank you, please. Because Kelly needs it to live.
Well, this is entirely right now. This is entirely for art, tech, and just cool stuff. Like if you like us looking cooler, this is all about doing cool stuff.
Support small creators,
Yes.
because
We're very small. Like we're like, depending on your screen, we're like
Twitch takes a lot of creators' money, and they're thinking about taking more of it. So support small
Oh,
creators,
I didn't
please.
heard that.
Yeah, we can talk about it
Oh.
afterwards.
We can talk about it afterwards. Quick note: if you watch creators and they have a Patreon over a Twitch, you go to the Patreon over the. It's like an extra 30% that they get or more.
Donate links over bits. That's what I'll tell you. Also, donate
Mhm.
links over bits. y'all.
100%. Also, thank you for the comment on my hat. It was mine.
It's
Your
very
hat is
good.
dope.
Steal
It's
it.
very good.
Thank you guys so much for coming out. This has been an incredible panel. Again, thank you, Em, for joining us and
My
providing
pleasure.
so much incredible insight. We will definitely have you back for further discussions.
Please do.
Uh,
And
Kelly?
you'll have a Discord. Can you drop your Discord link in the chat? Because I want to
Yeah.
encourage all of the folks watching to, if you're not in the DorkTales Discord, go do that. And I need to join your Discord as well. So
Yeah, that's
Get
weird.
over there.
I'm in
And
your
like
Discord, right? I feel like I
I
am.
think so. I think you're in our Discord. I hope
I
you're
just
in our
have all my
Discord.
Discords muted because I'm in like. Ugh,
Yeah,
Too
it's
many of
so
them?
weird.
I will also remind everybody that this was a really big, heavy topic. And if you do want to talk about some stuff with friends in a consensual environment, we do have a chat in our Discord just called Party Heal. So if you want to come have a quick chat about some feelings about this or feelings about characters, or you just need to get something off your chest, maybe you won't not everybody engages all the time, but sometimes it's nice to just write out the words and get a
Absolutely.
little hug reacts. So
Nice.
Yeah.
And then for tomorrow, I'm just going to tell you. So tomorrow, come back at 10 a.m. We've got painting and miniatures, tips, tricks, and just chilling out
Oh,
with
so
people.
fun. We love a mini paint.
At noon, we've got history at the table, where a bunch of us with a history background are going to explain how to use history in games in like real world settings, and we've even got someone who has mastery of history of alcohol, so that'll be fun.
Ooh.
Can't have D&D without talk of how we drink bad water. Costuming and character design is at 2 p.m. Writing for tabletop role-playing games, which is going to feature some of my friends from Onyx Path, as well as an indie writer who will be fantastic to see, is going to be at 4. Games you should be playing right now is at 6, where
Right
we talk
now.
about things that aren't D&D. And
Oh,
like
so
things
good.
that...
So
another
many.
game.
Mhm.
and then at 8 p.m. is the no prep game, where I don't know what they're playing. I told them to pick a level between 1 and 10 and have fun. So come, you can influence the game with your donations, and it's... I don't have a plot. I don't have anything. It's all improv on the spot. And
That sounds just like around a DM roulette. Hey, Kelly?
It's very similar to DM Roulette. We did this last year, and when I saw you guys doing DM Roulette, I was like, oh, I really love this. DM Roulette is monthly on a Wednesday.
We play
y'all.
DM Roulette. Yeah, it is our baby. It is a concept we invented. So we play
really
it
good.
on the
Genius.
last Wednesday of every month, where we have 6 DMs sit down together. One DM starts us off, and every 15 minutes, the characters rotate. We play characters we've never seen before, level 3s. We rotate around. Then the next person is the DM. The next person plays the next character, and chat can influence dropping bits to donating money to cause a rotation. We've had Wand of Wonders dropped in people's hands. Deck of Many Things is dropped in people's hands. Advantage. It's a very fun time. Come hang out and watch a DM. Oh, those are all on our YouTube too, so you can go watch this over there.
Go watch the one I was in. It was fun.
Yeah.
It was like back like six months ago. Something
Yeah,
like that.
it was a while ago.
Good.
Yeah,
It was a good time.
very good time.
Yeah, so we'll see you later, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being here. Good night, everybody.
Have a good night, dorks. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.